Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today's explainer is diving into something really extraordinary. We're looking at a deeply moving, profoundly mysterious single case study that bridges the gap between raw human grief, cutting-edge theories of consciousness, and, get this, ancient sacred geometry. We'll be following the 5-year journey of a man whose identical twin's death sparked a cascade of totally unexplained experiences. As we unpack the biological and psychological parallels together, the implications are just, well, they're truly staggering. Let's jump right in.
Now, the sheer statistical and biological weight of this timeline is hard to ignore. To put it into perspective, in April 2020, the author's identical twin was diagnosed with terminal stage 4 liver cirrhosis. And what's wild is that it was a disease of completely unknown origin in this case. Just months later, in December, he sadly passed away at only 47. Now, fast forward nearly 3 years to May 2023. The surviving twin, our author, receives the exact same stage 4 diagnosis at the exact same hospital. This literal physical mirroring really sets a profound stage for the incredible journey that follows.
Okay, moving on to Section 1, the twin connection. Here we'll look at the biological and spiritual ties. An absolutely crucial point to understand right up front is that the author didn't just casually jot down his shifting memories of grief. He maintained strict academic rigor, using something called heuristic inquiry. Basically, this is a formal qualitative research method designed for when a researcher has a direct, super intimate experience of the exact phenomenon they're studying. So, from 2020 through 2025, he kept a meticulous journal. He documented his encounters within hours of them happening, always in a calm, controlled environment. It's this discipline that really grounds the extraordinary events we're about to explore.
Which brings us to Section 2, Visions in the Dark, where we explore these anomalous phenomena.
So just days after his brother's passing, the unexpected happened. On the actual night of his twin's death, the author experienced this raw, unsolicited catalyst. He notes, quote, "A flash of white light filled the room. It came with the word, yes, felt rather than heard." He wasn't sitting there trying to summon anything, It just broke through. And this solitary, radiant event opened the door to a sustained pattern of experiences over the next 5 years.
Over the following months, highly structured geometric visions actually began to appear during his meditations. Imagine this. What starts as a dark, rigid square folds inward, transforming itself into a radiant circle of white light. And the most brilliant part? This visual shift was always accompanied by a profound, nonverbal sense of his twin's presence right there in the room. It was a connection that felt entirely real and responsive to him. But geometry and light weren't the only things he saw. During periods of high stress or extreme vulnerability, a guardian wolf would suddenly manifest to his left. He noted it never actually looked at him. Its gaze was always directed outward toward the room, like it was standing watch. The author said he never felt fear, only an unmistakable protective quality, as if a firm, steadying boundary had been drawn exactly when he needed it most.
All right, let's pivot to Section 3, Theories of Consciousness. How do we actually understand these phenomena?
From a psychological perspective, modern science offers a really validating framework here called continuing bonds theory. Now, you know how society often tells people to just move on after a loss? Well, this theory proposes that healthy adaptation to profound grief doesn't actually mean emotional detachment. Instead, it involves forming an ongoing, evolving relationship with the person who passed away. So under this framework, sensing his twin isn't some sort of pathology. It's a completely adaptive, genuinely healthy coping mechanism. Impartial science also offers several fascinating ways to biologically ground these anomalies. First, neurocognitive models suggest that intense grief naturally induces visions as the brain tries to process severe trauma. Then, there's the shared genetic or epigenetic vulnerability, which could explain that identical illness they both had. And for sure, the most mind-bending one. To explain their deeply intertwined minds, some researchers look to quantum entanglement. They propose that specific structures in the brain, like microtubules, might allow for non-local information exchange, basically meaning consciousness could potentially operate way beyond our conventional biological limits.
That leads us perfectly into Section 4, the Enochic paradigm. Let's look at the spiritual framework.
So we have two very different frameworks at play, right? We just discussed the grounded biological explanations. But to truly contextualize the specific visions he was having, the author discovered a completely different lens, the spiritual explanation, specifically the Enochic paradigm. This framework views the identical twins not just as biological copies, but as a single twin soul. Here, the veil of death transforms their relationship into a dynamic messenger and scribe dyad.
Let's dive into the visual core of this spiritual framework. Those folding squares and luminous circles we talked about earlier, they actually heavily mirror an ancient concept called Metatron's cube. It's this incredibly complex figure in sacred geometry, constructed from 13 interlocking circles. Mystical traditions believe it contains all 5 Platonic solids and serves as the literal blueprint for translating infinite divine light into structured material form. The amazing part is that the author was experiencing this exact visual progression long before he ever even knew what Metatron's cube was.
Based on ancient Second Temple Jewish literature, the Enoic paradigm proposes a profound reconfiguration. The idea is that when a deeply bonded pair is separated by death, the deceased takes on the role of the celestial messenger. Their job is to translate this divine light and geometry. Meanwhile, the living sibling becomes the earthly scribe, the one actively perceiving, recording, and translating these experiences into human understanding. So his brother was sending the light, and our author was writing the journal.
Next up is Section 5, Validation through Mediums. Let's look at some fascinating external data points.
Now, to see if this deep connection could be picked up by outsiders, the author utilized strict double-blind protocols with professional mediums, meaning they knew absolutely nothing about him or his visions beforehand. In one session, a directive text attributed to the twins simply stated, Genesis, in the beginning. Now, this didn't just mean the first book of the Bible. It specifically pointed the author toward pre-Genesis cosmological traditions, the exact ancient Enochic literature that finally gave him the Metatron's cube framework. Talk about a real game changer.
Later on, in a completely separate blind reading in June 2025 with a second medium, Michelle Dashwood, another breakthrough occurred. She documented a list of seemingly random, highly specific terms attributed to the twin. She gave him words like celebration, invites, happy, recognition, and specifically the phrase 6 years.
As you'll see, these random terms mapped onto the author's real life in the subsequent year with stunning accuracy. 6 years aligned perfectly because 2026 marked exactly 6 years since his twin's passing. Invites and recognition materialized when the author was unexpectedly invited to become a research associate at a really prestigious university center. And celebration and happy corresponded directly to his joyful acceptance of that appointment. It really takes the phenomena entirely out of the internal realm and anchors it right into observable reality.
Finally, Section 6, Reimagining Human Grief, taking a look at loss from a whole new perspective.
The author makes a very important theological and practical distinction here. He clarifies that he was never engaging in necromancy, which is the active, forceful human attempt to summon, conjure, or command the deceased. Instead, his experiences were entirely spontaneous after-death communications. They were unsolicited, passive receptions. The light, the geometry, the guardian wolf, they all arrived completely on their own, initiated entirely from the other side during moments of quiet prayer or deep distress.
Ultimately, the author grounds his heuristic inquiry with a really poignant reminder. He wrote, quote, "The aim of this paper has not been to prove survival after death, but to document a sustained experiential pattern that emerged during a period of profound personal loss." And I think that's key. This explainer isn't here to offer empirical, undeniable proof of an afterlife. It's here to impartially honor and analyze the powerful, undeniable reality of a surviving twin who is deeply, profoundly connected to his brother. Which leaves us with a profound, lingering question. When we consider the identical illnesses, the radiant sacred geometry, the guardian wolf, and those highly specific medium validations, are these visions simply the biological brain's extraordinary way of coping with the devastating loss of a twin? Or are we looking at genuine evidence of a consciousness that extends far beyond the physical body, linked by an enduring, unbreakable bond of love? It's a fascinating mystery for sure, and one that absolutely leaves us wanting to learn more about the true nature of the human spirit. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today.